I find when I make progress in one area, another takes a hit. I've been focusing heavily on my emotional and spiritual growth, but in the process, it feels like my professional life has suffered. Any insight? Yes, the struggle is real. This is actually why we do the 8 spheres, right? And really challenge folks to balance those. Not balance. We always say we're not about balance. Not balance those, but keep them all in mind. But I would say that the goal isn't. I would argue that there's not. It's not realistic to set a goal that you're gonna like crush it in every area. You're gonna get a point where you're crushing it in all 8 spheres at the same time. Like I just don't feel like that's realistic. I think you can be pretty strong in all of them, but I don't know that you'll ever rate yourself a 10 out of 10 in all of them at the same time, just because you're one person and 8 spheres is a lot, and someone could argue that there are 16 of them, right? We're humans with dynamic worlds and lives. And so um, I say this all the time. This is why we stress balance, or not balance, geez, harmony, right? Because it's not about getting here, it's about understanding this is life. We don't want to do this, right? Because that's like maybe what you're feeling right now. We want to get to the point where because this is life. Like life happens. You're going to have unfortunately, folks passing away, who you love. You're going to have a car issue come up with some repairs that you perhaps were not financially prepared for. And even if you were, you really weren't trying to spend the money on that, right? You're going to have challenges in your romantic relationship. Those kinds of things happen. And so, right, you, as you said, right, are in this focus where you're really on your emotional and spiritual well being, right? And you're intentionally focused on that. So there are times where, um, like I can think specifically, and I use this example all the time. Like every person who has elevated to certain levels of success will tell you there's just no way around moments of sacrifice. I don't believe in like full blown just like giving up paying attention to your family at all for years on years so that you can be, where you want to be financially or career wise. But there are definitely some significant times where like you just can't do it all. There's still only 24 hours in a day, period. Like that ain't never changing, right? And so there are times where if you're going hard in one area, you do need to pay attention. If you're knowingly going hard in a certain area, you need to, before you even do that, think about like how might this affect the other areas. And let me start by thinking about that and making a choice on that rather than having it happen to me, right? Ideally, for example, I went into this run with my PhD knowing my relationship was going to take a hit. So I sat down with Dwayne and said, "Boo, you know what's about to happen, right?" Right. And so we prepared for that. We had a conversation about that. And I reminded him about that. And I stepped up while I couldn't spend as much quality time, or when I was with him, I was pretty much a walking dead woman. I did the best I could at being even more expressive than I already am to tell him how much I love him and how much I appreciate his sacrifice, and acknowledging he's making a sacrifice along the way to minimize how much that romantic sphere suffered while I was going hard in this career sphere, right? Um, so thinking that's an example of kind of thinking ahead to know in some cases, like I'm going hard. Another example might be like if you go on a really serious physical health journey where you're really trying to step your game up physical health wise, and you and your partner tend to eat together, have drinks together, whatever you do, and you about to cut that stuff out. You need to have that conversation ahead of time and say, listen, this is coming. Let's think about how this might affect our relationship or our flow. And if possible, let's try to think ahead about how we can intentionally make some adjustments to how we roll in a way that keeps the fun part and the connection part there, even though we're not doing some of the things we were doing before. So hopefully that makes sense. There should be you should be able, and many times, to at least identify that. Sometimes you just have no idea, and then as soon as you're aware, you need to figure out what's going on and whether or not you're going too hard in the other area, or in fact, you do need to go that hard. And then sometimes it's just about sucking it up, people. Like, you just got to suck it up. Now, you specifically ask about emotional and spiritual growth. And, I would say if you're losing footing in other things because of your focus on emotional and spiritual growth, well, I went through a season of this. This is how I got to who I am now. But again, now that I think about it, I intentionally, because I'm a grinder, you guys know that by now. Like, I go hard in the paint on career. I literally put all my dreams and hopes on the line, on hold. I decided to pause in my hustle because I knew that I really needed to invest in myself and heal myself. And so I went on a several year journey where I wasn't really grinding on my dreams and goals other than spiritual, like my career and finance goals. Pretty much it was just to just maintain and maybe elevate a little bit, but no major effort made there. But again, I chose that. So I think it's about thinking ahead about it. Now, I don't know exactly what your scenario is of what you mean by your professional life has suffered, but a couple of thoughts. One, has it really suffered, or is it just that your definition of success probably may need some fine tuning? Because sometimes we're showing up to say professional life, for professional life to look good, I need to be going hard all the time. I need to be above average performance all the time. Right. And so if all you've done is just come back into what most of us would, or most people, or even your boss or supervisor would call a acceptable level of performance, then the issue isn't that it's suffering, is that you need to acknowledge that you don't need to go as hard as you used to, or at least not right now. Right. However, if you really are falling off, I mean, unless your spiritual and emotional situation is so bad that you feel like you are in a dangerous situation, like suicidal, you know, then I would ask myself, like, how am I going about this emotional and spiritual growth? Am I going at it in a way that isn't necessarily even conducive? Because if we're saying we want to be emotionally and spiritually well, then if we mess around and get fired, I trust and believe it's probably going to mess with your emotional and spiritual well-being, right? So part of being well, and this is why we do the 8 spheres, is to make sure you're never fully ignoring any of the spheres. Even if you put one intentionally on hold, it is not to say ignore it, right? Because you can't mess around, because otherwise you out here aspiring to be like a Gandhi that's also without a home, right? And I would love to I hope that that's not your aspiration, right? That you are, wanting to elevate. And so, you may also want to just think about, we tend to like go, like, once we're like, oh, I really want to get better at this thing, we tend to go so freaking hard on it to where we make it our life. And generally speaking, I mean, there are times, again, when it comes to business, sometimes you got to go hard. Sometimes with physical health, you better go hard because you haven't gotten your shit together and you keep saying you're going to lose weight. The doctors are coming for you. The diagnosis is coming for you, and you better get serious. Everything else probably needs to damn near get ignored, right? So in those types of moments where you need to get your shit together, then maybe you do need to hella ignore some stuff. But unless you're in some serious situations, you want to be thoughtful, so that you don't end up taking L's, as I call them, losses, right, in other areas. But again, it may just be that you need to temper your expectations about your professional role, because I would argue if you're really trying to go on a for realsies, like major emotional and spiritual growth journey, you shouldn't probably be trying to aspire to like get a promotion at the same time at work, because the type of focus and energy it takes for that type of grind. And again, this could apply to any sphere. You're more than likely not going to hit them all like really hard at the same time, and be successful at it. I say good point. Sometimes it's okay for our career to not be on a constant upward climb. Listen, I say this all the time. Like, the example I give, which I think is just so awesome, shout out to myself. When somebody has to get double knee surgery, like both knees, they don't do both knees at the same time. Like, they could, in the sense of like, hey, we're here, we're together, I got the knife, we got your body, let's just bust it out. No, they don't do that. Why? because you cannot emotionally, physically, it will be a lot to do those two at the same time. So they do one, they go all the way through recovery on that, and then you come back and do the other. So we should never be under the knife overall. Like, we should never be under the knife, meaning trying to grow and elevate in a serious way all the time, because that is exhausting and that's not the point of growing. The point of growing is to continue to increase your ability to enjoy your life in real life. You cannot enjoy your life in real life if you're always growing or like intentionally trying to take on the next project, read the next book so you can get better at a thing. There are seasons for rest. There are seasons, not even just for rest, but you got to let stuff marinate. I'm thinking about a recent client who I had her read this book, and she didn't even come back like, let's talk about it. She's like, okay, I finished the book. What's the next book you think I should read? And I'm like, there is no book you should read. Because if you just read a book, but you haven't embodied what you learned, then you was just reading to read. And that's not what we're doing. So folks, you have to learn how to like take it in and live it out. So if you've gone on a journey, you're like, oh, I got it now. Well, then give yourself time to live what you've learned out, like to the point where it naturally comes out in you, like it's alive in you without you trying, right? And again, just generally speaking, like we would be tired if we're always working on ourselves. So this is the whole thing of like the importance, and I talk about this a lot too, is like zooming out and remember, why are you even doing what you're doing, right? If you lose track of the why, then you get into this grind mode. Your why, if you're messing around with me and anything to do with Joy Society, then I'm on team enjoy your life in real life. Enjoy your life in real life don't mean grind all the time. It doesn't mean be the best top performer of everything all the time, because that would then also mean you're not enjoying your life, right? Because there's a sacrifice that comes with that. And so this is really like a skill set to develop your ability to sense. And this is why you have to know you. You have to spend time with you. So many of us run from ourselves. That's why we always have music on, always have a movie on, always somewhere, always going, because we don't want to slow down and be alone with this here wild, crazy thing, right? But the more you spend time with yourself and get to know yourself, the more you will be able to know and truly sense, what season is it? Is it a season for growth? Is it a season to just be? If it is a season for growth, in what area? And you don't go and ask that. Like, I don't say, I feel like I want to grow. I wonder what it's in. I'm going through life, making sure I'm centered on being. And what happens is I start sensing. How do I know I'm sensing it? Egg, you got to be in tune. But it's like, dang, I just saw this thing on TV. Oh, shoot, somebody just said something about that. Or, and so it's like, oh, shoot, there's this theme coming up that really keeps catching my attention. And I just, every time it comes, it's like, boom, like, oh man, that's like so speaks to me, right? It's either that or you're just in this space where something continues to just bother you, right? And you're like, man, it's time. It's really time to like focus on that. I've thought about it many times over the years, but this must be the time, right? Um, on the flip side, on the rest of like, if I'm not if there's not something obviously presenting itself to me that makes me feel like I really need to lean into that space or that sphere or that topic, then I'm not out here trying to just go find the next thing to elevate in. Like, that means you haven't learned how to be. Like you're a human, right? You have many roles, but you're a human, right? And the best experiences in life is when you learn how to be in between being a wife or a husband or a spouse or a teacher or a counselor or whatever your role is. Like, you're the being, to be is being, right? So being able to know when it's time for being it's always time for being, but sometimes it's time for being and growing. And then sometimes it's just time for being, right? Because you got to get good at it, just enjoying life too, not elevating. Like part of elevating is to enjoy life. But if you just go, 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 where did the enjoyment part come in? It didn't. Because you're over here growing all the time. Congratulations, but not. Because like that would mean where's the enjoyment part, right? So it's similar to how like when I do my vacations, I don't there's no agenda. Like I'm just being. That's the agenda, is to get really good at just being, right? Not get good at vacationing, get good at being, staying in flow. This means a lot of canceled dinner reservations because I said it because I know I gotta have one or I can't get in. But if in the moment when I get to it, if that ain't what if it ain't feeling like that's what I'm supposed to be doing, then we ain't doing it. You know what I mean? So hopefully that helps.